Guys, I don't even know where to start seriously. To this day, I get goosebumps just remembering that night. It was a Friday at the end of the year when my theater group and I stayed to rehearse. We had an important performance the following week, and the director asked us to rehearse in a more private room because the main auditorium was already occupied. And guess where they sent us? For the old school auditorium. For those who don't know, that old auditorium is the weirdest place in the entire school. Seriously. It's in a rather isolated corner of the building, and like most of the doors don't even close properly. It always has a musty smell, and the ceiling has some dark stains, some really disgusting leaks. I don't think anyone had used that place in years, and there were already some jokes going around about how it must be haunted. At first, everything was normal. We were trying to rehearse our lines and ignore the environment, but it only took a few minutes for the atmosphere to start getting weird. Do you know when you feel something cold in the air? It was like that. The room was stuffy because it was very hot outside, but suddenly the temperature there dropped, as if we had turned the air conditioning on full blast. But guess what? It didn't have air conditioning. It was too strange. As we continued the rehearsal, I started to hear some noises. It was the sound of footsteps, very slow, coming from the corridor outside. At first, I thought it was all in my head, but the noise was there, and it was very real. Then one of my friends, Leo, also started listening and commented, laughing, "You're listening to this, right?" He laughed, but I could see he was tense. And me too. You know that feeling that something isn't right. So it is. We decided to ignore it because, well, we had to finish the rehearsal. But then the auditorium door made a loud click, as if someone had turned the handle hard. Leo went there and tried to open the door, but nothing. It was locked. And the worst thing is that I was absolutely sure that we left it open because, no one wanted to get stuck inside. We started knocking on the door, shouting, but there was no sign of anyone on the other side. The school was completely silent, and it seemed like there was no one else in the building. That's when the situation started to get out of control, because out of nowhere, the lights started to flash. It blinks, until they go out for good. We stayed there in total darkness, just listening to our breathing, and that horrible feeling that there was someone else with us in the auditorium. Then came the worst. We heard breathing, but it was slow, heavy breathing, and it was coming from the back of the auditorium, in the last rows of seats. We tried to turn on our cell phones to see what it was, but the flashlights only illuminated the front a little. In the dark, you could only see a tall figure, a very long shadow, which looked like a person's body, but at the same time, it didn't look human at all. I was frozen with fear, and so were my friends. This shadow started to move, very slowly, coming towards us. Every step she took made the floor of the auditorium creak, and it seemed like that sound echoed throughout the entire room. I swear, it was one of the worst feelings of my life. I wanted to run away, but I couldn't move. The panic was so great that it felt like my body was trapped. It was then that Leo, out of nowhere, grabbed a chair and banged it with all his strength on the emergency window, which was very small and had super thick glass. After several blows, it managed to break, and we ran away, pushing each other to get through the window and onto the lawn outside. Everyone cut themselves a little on the shards of glass, but no one cared. We just wanted to get away from there. The next day, we tried to talk to the director, tell him what happened. He heard everything a bit seriously, but then he laughed a little and said it was all in our heads. And the worst thing was that he said that that auditorium didn't even have a key, and that no one, including him, had touched that door all night. To this day, when I remember that, I feel that shiver going up my spine. After that, I never went into that auditorium again, and just thinking about going near, it gives me a horrible feeling. The worst thing is that, to this day, when people at the theater stay late, they say that they sometimes hear footsteps, and that someone always thinks they see a shadow in the background. When I was in second grade, I stayed in the after-school care program because my parents couldn't pick me up early. It was a quiet place, just a few kids scattered around the room waiting for their parents. But there was one day that, to this day, I can't forget. I was sitting at one of the big tables, alone, because my friends had left earlier. The silence in the room was only broken by the sound of the ceiling fans, spinning slowly. In the corner, a group of popular girls was playing a game I had seen before but never really paid much attention to. It was that pencil game, where you put a piece of paper divided into 4 sections, yes, no, yes, no, and place 2 pencils on top of each other. The idea was to ask questions and wait for the top pencil to move on its own. They were laughing and whispering, asking silly things like, "Charlie, are you here?" or "Charlie, will I do well on the test?" Every time the pencil moved, they would scream, pretending to be scared, but it was clear they were having fun. After a while, one of the girls said she had to leave and, without ceremony, tossed the paper and pencils into her backpack without finishing the game. One of the rules of the game, from what I had heard, was to always say goodbye to Charlie before stopping, but they didn't care. I thought it was strange, but didn't say anything. Later, when almost everyone had already left, I started feeling something strange. The room seemed darker than usual, even with the lights on. The ceiling fans made a different sound, as if something was forcing the blades to turn. The silence, which had once been comforting, now felt oppressive. I looked around and noticed that, besides the monitor, there were only 2 other girls in the room. But even so, it felt like there was something else. That's when I heard the sound. Something like a faint dragging, coming from the corner of the room where the girls had been playing with the pencils. At first, I thought it was the monitor moving a chair, but he was on the other side of the room, typing on the computer. The sound kept going, drag, stop, drag again, as if someone was pushing something heavy across the floor. I looked to the corner and saw nothing, but for some reason, I couldn't take my eyes off it. My heart started to race. That's when I noticed one of the chairs had been moved. I knew where they had been before because I had been watching the girls play, and that chair definitely wasn't there before. I swallowed hard and tried to ignore it, but the dragging continued. Louder now. It sounded like it was getting closer. I don't know why, but my body froze. I couldn't get up. I couldn't call the monitor. I could only hear that sound growing nearer. Suddenly, the pencils the girls had used rolled out of one of their backpacks and fell to the floor with a sharp sound that echoed through the room. I looked at them, and I swear I saw the top pencil start to move on its own. It spun slowly, pointing in one direction, towards me. That's when the lights started flickering. The monitor finally looked up, but it seemed like he didn't see what I was seeing. He only complained about the electricity, but to me, it was much more than that. The lights flickered faster and faster, and the dragging sound was now right behind me. I couldn't turn around. I didn't want to. That's when I heard it, a voice whispering low, almost impossible to understand. "You didn't say goodbye." The phrase was repeated over and over, each time louder, until it sounded like a scream. I covered my ears, but the sound seemed to come from inside my head. When I finally gathered the courage to turn around, I saw a shadow, tall, thin, with something like long hair covering its face, standing in the corner of the room. I don't know how, but I screamed and ran out of there. The monitor didn't even try to stop me. He just shouted something about coming back. When I got home, I tried to forget about it, but that night I woke up at 3 in the morning to a strange sound. It was like something was being dragged down the hallway outside my room. I couldn't sleep. The next morning, the girls who played the game also had similar experiences. They heard noises of things breaking, chains rattling, and even faint laughter. They never played the game again, and I never stayed in that room after dark. I've always felt something weird about the bathrooms at my school, especially the one at the back of the oldest building. Everyone avoided that place. They said the plumbing was bad, but it felt like more than that. The bathroom had this heavy, oppressive feeling, like something wasn't right. Some students told stories about it. Doors slamming on their own, lights flickering for no reason. I always thought it was just rumors to scare the younger kids. Until that day. It was a Tuesday, and I stayed after school to finish a project. It was almost dark outside, and the hallway was empty. My notebook had spilled ink all over, so I went to the nearest bathroom to grab some paper towels. Of course, it was the bathroom in the old block the only one open at that time. The hallway was silent, so silent that my footsteps echoed like someone was walking right behind me. When I reached the bathroom door, I hesitated for a moment. I don't know why, but I felt a chill, like someone was watching me. I looked around, but the hallway was empty. I shook it off, sighed, and pushed the door open. As soon as I walked in, the air changed. It was colder, but not in a normal way. It felt heavier. The weak lights flickered occasionally, casting shifting shadows on the stained walls. The sinks had dried watermarks, and the last faucet was dripping slowly, every drop echoing in the quiet space like a ticking clock. I picked a stall in the middle and went inside. As soon as I closed the door, I heard something. It was faint, but distinct, like the soft click of another stall door closing. I froze. Was someone else in here? I crouched down to look under the stalls, but didn't see any feet. I stayed quiet, straining to listen, and then I heard it again. This time, a door slammed shut further down the row. My heart started racing. Maybe it was just the wind, I told myself. It was an old bathroom. Everything creaked and made noises. But the sound didn't stop. Another door slammed, and another. It was getting closer, each slam louder than the last, as if something was moving down the line of stalls, banging each door along the way. When it reached the stall next to mine, I stopped breathing. My entire body froze. I didn't know what to do. Should I run, or should I stay and hope it went away? Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Everything went completely silent. For a moment, I thought it was over, but then the lights started flickering. Slowly at first, then faster and faster until the room plunged into total darkness. I couldn't see a thing, and the air felt suffocating, like the darkness itself was pressing down on me. That's when I heard it. Thud, thud, thud. Footsteps coming from the bathroom entrance. The sound was slow and deliberate, like something heavy dragging its feet. Each step echoed louder than the last. My eyes were wide open, but I couldn't see anything. I huddled in a corner of the stall, trying not to make a sound. Then something banged on my stall door. Not a knock, a violent, heavy pounding, as if someone or something was trying to break it down. I clapped my hands over my mouth to keep from screaming. My eyes filled with tears as I prayed for it to stop. The banging suddenly stopped, and the silence returned. But I knew I wasn't alone. The lights flickered on for a brief moment, and in that split second, I saw it reflected in the mirror above the sinks. A tall, shadowy figure standing by the last stall. It had no face, just an outline, darker than the surrounding darkness. That was it. Panic took over, and I threw the stall door open and ran. I didn't look back. I heard the lights popping and the doors slamming behind me as I sprinted for the exit. When I finally reached the hallway, the air felt lighter, but I didn't stop running until I was outside. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head. The doors, the footsteps, that shadow. The next day, I told a few friends about it, and, to my surprise, I wasn't the only one who had experienced strange things in that bathroom. One friend said the lights had gone out on them once while they were in there. A senior mentioned hearing weird laughter coming from the stalls when no one else was around. Since then, I've avoided that bathroom at all costs. But sometimes when I pass that hallway, I swear I can still hear the sound of doors slamming inside.